I've been noticing a trend lately. I keep getting asked more and more how we at Aleph compensate our salespeople. And I don't know if that is just a result of people hiring more salespeople. I hope so. I hope you're growing your business and you're adding more salespeople. But that is a topic that's super important, and it gets more complicated as you have a bigger and bigger team. On today's episode, I have Micah on, and we dive super deep on Aleph's process and philosophy for how we compensate salespeople. I promise you, if you listen to this, you'll get a ton of value out of it. I will say though, this is probably going to be best consumed in front of a computer. So if you're listening to this via audio only, you can get some good value, but you'll get the most value sitting down on a computer. Head over to our YouTube channel and watch it there. I hope you love it. Welcome to another episode of Aleph Ventures TV. Today, I am joined once again by my good brother, Micah Stelter. Micah, welcome back.
Oh my gosh, it's so good to be back.
Isn't it?
It is.
Micah, for any of those who don't know, CEO of Paris Brands here in the Twin Cities, founding board member of Aleph Holdings, leader of all things sales in the Aleph ecosystem. We've had on for a couple episodes, check those out, but we're talking sales and a little, I think the goal is to go pretty deep. We're going to do some screen sharing and get into something that's pretty important. Does that sound okay, Micah?
I can't wait.
Okay. So let me tee this
deep.
up. Let's do it. I want to tee this up. So compensating salespeople is something that I tend to get asked a lot from folks. So I get a lot of questions around how we compensate salespeople. And I would just say, I feel like I get that question disproportionately more from people who have bigger companies. And I think this kind of makes sense. Things start compounding, how you're paying people, compensating people, you have a team, your team is growing, so et cetera. And I think I've also just heard of a lot of frustration of never really feeling like they crack the code of how to compensate salespeople. Like, what is the right way? You're balancing incentive, versus what actually works for the business. And yeah, it just seems like that's a topic that there's ambiguity and people don't feel super clear. And I would say that's probably one of the clearest things about how we do business and has really helped the growth. Maybe, Micah, I just want to, we didn't start with this from day one. So I think want to be, humble and honest that like we had to learn this through iterations. But can you just maybe speak to why is how you compensate your sales people and your sales teams? Why is that so important? What comes to mind there?
Yeah, I think for a business owner's perspective, protecting the profit dollar while still scaling and keeping a salesperson motivated is why it's so important. To your point, you're correct. Like there is different iterations of how we've done sales. You can look at it as percentage on revenue. You could look at that and manage to that. One of the reasons why we have evolved to this cost on margin model is that the model has allowed us to hold sales accountable for our true marketing expense and overhead expense in the business. And so that's been a huge win, and that directly relates to the profit dollars that are being protected. So if your marketing costs more, sales needs to feel that, not just the business owner. If your overhead costs a certain amount, you need to make sure it is burdened over the salespeople appropriately. That is often a component that gets missed in compensating salespeople. That usually just gets eaten up by the business owner in a culture of, hey, those are my expenses to manage. And that's okay. Like there's nothing inherently wrong with that. But many business owners have a hard time keeping a pulse on all that data. And they lose probably 4 to 5 profit points in the sales and marketing world every year just because it gets so unwieldy and it's not fully incentivized for a win-win-win. So over the years, this model that we designed has helped us to kind of recover those points, but also create a way for salespeople to be very motivated to kind of beat the budget in their sales role.
Yeah, and I think that motivation piece is something that, like, why I wanted to make an episode on this. I think people, it comes kind of natural, or it's common sense of the scenario of I overpay a salesperson. So a business owner doesn't want to have a situation where they feel like they're overpaying a salesperson, or they maybe are trying to hire what they perceive as talented people, and they just don't feel like their offer is compelling enough. But I think it's like more nuanced than that. If you have a lot of those, experiences where, you overpay, or you're not, hiring talented people, I think just the owner can lose motivation to grow. Like, part of the sustainability of growth is just that the owner feels confident, is decisive, and moving forward. And if you're not clear on how you're compensating your salespeople, which are leading that growth, I think that can cause hesitation, that can cause self-doubt. I think the clearer this is, the more confident you can be in your growth.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I think the way we do, we'll get into this too in detail, but the way we do compensation for sales in our world, the salesperson grows in compensation, and it's a bigger win for the business owner and for the salesperson as they become more skilled in what they're doing. And so there are specific things that owners are going to do to help make even stronger salespeople that are making even more money. That is going to be very appreciated by the sales team, but the owner gets a huge growth and sustainable profit on their side as well. And I think those aligned incentives are probably the biggest tricky thing that people are always trying to find. And so hopefully when we're done, people have a better perspective of how you could do this, because it's hard to go back after you go this route, and it's motivating to both parties, and that's very hard to achieve in roles as you try to scale.
Yeah, I love it. Okay, let's jump in to the components of this, and if you want to kind of tee this up, or any disclaimers or anything like that, feel free to do this. But I think maybe first, like, it is like kind of natural of, hey, how do you pay, again, common questions. Do you do salary? Is it all commission? How do you compensate these people? Let's get into some of the components of how we put that together.
Yeah, that'd be great. I think right off the bat, a disclaimer would be, you do need to understand your numbers and track your numbers and do some monthly trending to do this model well. Little secret, you have to do that to run a successful business too. So this is something you should be doing. And if you're not, it's going to be very hard in a lot of areas of your business to be successful. So I'm working from an assumption that you are watching your numbers, you are thinking like a business owner, you're wanting to scale, you're watching your data, and you're making moves each month based on what that data tells you. So let's work from that assumption. Let's also work from the assumption that we're generally hiring candidates that can learn this skill. Either they have some experience, or you're good at teaching them. If you're a bad coach and you really aren't committed to helping your teams become professional at what they do, that's also a challenge. So we're working for the assumption that you hire decent humans, that you are going to put the work in on training them and helping them throughout the year, and you're going to watch your numbers. So if you're doing those things, you're a really good start on a plan like this. So if it's okay, I could do some screen sharing and show some assumptions of how, I would just say, when somebody asks me, what do you pay your salespeople? That is a loaded question, because it depends. Every single salesperson in my organization makes a different compensation, but they're compensated the exact same way, right? So it is directly related to what their performance is, of how they get paid, which is normal for sales. But I don't have a different model. It's all the same model of cost on margin. And in order to help explain a little bit higher level what cost on margin is, I'm going to share my screen and show you where I would start. So The cost on margin for us, we define as what is the sales and marketing costs in the company. And this is all of the costs, right? Not some of the costs, all of the costs on the margin that the company is projected to produce. So one of the things you can do in your historical numbers, if you pull QuickBooks, if you have a decently clean P&L, you can pull QuickBooks and sort of sum up all the sales related line items, divide that on the margin that your business brought in, right? Most of you are tracking labor and materials, and then you get to your gross profit. And then from there you have your production management costs, things like that. Well, we do it very similarly, except we put project management and field costs and then some of our giving funds above the line. So that's part of our COGS. So just something to keep in mind. I would consider doing that if I were you. Because if you don't and you pay sales reps on margin, you're going to overpay them on the percentage because you still have to pay project managers and things like that. So when you get into percentages and percentages of what, it can get confusing. So I created this little basic P&L to show you what I mean and what costs I'm considering. If you understand that you can't pay, you have to take your production management costs out of the equation before you pay salespeople. So if you have them below the line, that's fine, but just make sure you're taking those costs out of what salespeople can make in their budget, right? So, and what I mean by that, if you just look at this simple P&L, if I zero out this production management and field costs, the margin's 51%. If I pay my salespeople costs on margin on 51%, or I pay them some commission off of this margin, I'm probably overpaying that role. I want to pull the project management out of that and then have them be paid on the true actual margin to the business. So for us, that is, there's production management and field costs, material, labor, and then we have giving. So the sales reps don't get this part of the margin. This is true COGS. They get this part of the margin for their commissions and into their plan. So that's where I would start. Basic assumptions on this little business model are 3.6 in sales, 3.4 produced revenue. If you know your numbers from previous years, you can build when you're doing your business planning, you can get a lot closer to what you think your margin target might be. This is a good looking Paris painting model, right? This would be like what our Paris painting model would look like. We would have our labor. We're going to try and get to 33. We might be at 35. We want to set a plan for 34. Materials could be a little less or a little more, but generally between 12 and 15%. Production management and field costs are somewhere between 5 and 9% for us. And then giving is always 1%. In our company, we've chose to do that. I left this here because I want to encourage anybody watching this. You should give out of your business. That's a great idea. So to be able to build that into your business, that you're going to be generous, give to things you care about, and then have your teams be working that every dollar, 1% of it is going to something that is maybe local, maybe a Paint It Forward project, something like that. So quick plug for that. But that for us is all in our COGS in our company. You might have different numbers here, but basically revenue, COGS, you get to the contribution margin here. That's at 42%. Okay. So after labor and materials. Go ahead.
Pause you, Micah. So just if you're listening along, kind of encourage this all the way. If you go, well, I don't know, job by job, we don't job cost every job, or getting to our labor clarity, our material clarity, our PM clarity across the whole company, that's kind of hard. I think there's an element of, well, you need to. I think that would be some of our, the premise here is, if you really want to have a robust compensation model for salespeople that is sustainable, it needs to factor in the gross profit, the margin that they bring in, not simply the revenue. So I just want to encourage anybody who, if you are, just don't throw your hands up if this isn't clear. Take this as an encouragement. You got to get clear on your margin by salesperson across every single job.
There's a lot of business owners that are going to look at their P&L at the end of the year, and they're going to kind of understand their costs. They're going to see if they made any money and they're happy or they're unhappy, but there's different mindsets there. We are speaking from a professional business owner that wants to scale. That's somebody, you cannot do an end of the year review, and that's the one you do. You can't even do like 2 reviews. You have to review monthly, and you set these plans. And if you see labor's trending high and materials are trending high, you need to manage the business to the original percent. So that takes action and work and intention to get your margins right. So that's critical. This margin is the lifeblood of the business. That's when the business starts making money, right? So everybody in our company is aligned to this line, not to this line. This is the one that matters. If this one is projecting lower, you need more revenue, right? You have to get more revenue in order to hit the margin target, because from margin comes the rest of the cost and then your profit. And how you manage that is really important. You have to see that every month to know what you have to do in the business to bring this into shape. And it never looks like the spreadsheet. Life is never the spreadsheet, but the spreadsheet can give you a roadmap, and you can do actions throughout the year to try and bring it back into what you want it to look like here. So another plug on that. These are all the underpinnings of how you can have a sales plan like this, right? So in this example business model, 1.4 million in margin, that'd be great. For many people that are sitting at, under $1 million, it's like, this would be great to get to somewhere like this. I could really do some things, but there are costs that scale with growing this. And down below, I've kind of worked some percentages that feel reasonable to me based on what Haakon and I have seen over the hundreds of companies we looked at over the years. We have active 20 partners, and that's growing, probably 21 now. And we are always adding new companies to Aleph Ventures, and we see a lot of the data, a lot of the businesses, and we're working
due diligence with many more companies than we partner with. So we just see a lot of books.
See it all. So we're really, really well equipped at what is common out there and then what is exceptional. The Aleph Ventures companies have some good exceptional P&Ls and planning rhythms. And this is what I would say a pretty decent model. The general bucket of sales and marketing should be between 12 and 15%. It can move closer to the 12 and 13% in kind of a boom year where people are going gangbusters. The economy's great. You can save on sales and marketing, but there's other areas in the business that might cost more in those seasons. So you got to know what season you're in, but we're in definitely a 13 and 14% sales and marketing world because they're a little bit softer. There's things you can do to get an edge on that, and that's not for everybody, but I think I planned this smart at saying 13.7 is what sales and marketing is. And my point isn't to say build your business exactly like this, but it's more about showing you, how do I get to cost on margin, and how do I start beginning to plan what I can pay my salespeople, right? So in this model of a $3.4 million company, I'm saying 5% is going to go to marketing spend to buy leads for my salespeople. I'm going to have $10,000 in general marketing. So that's website, maybe some design, things like maybe some collateral tools, things like that. I'm going to have marketing management at 30 grand. This could be a vendor that you hire. You're paying $2,500 a month. Or it could be you have somebody in-house that's supporting it plus a vendor. Like, there's different ways to look at that. But total marketing here came in at 6.32%. I don't think that's unreasonable to say that could be a budget that would work. You might be higher or lower, depending on what your reality is today. Then sales-based and commission. Go ahead.
This is a growing company. Maybe it would be the thing to say is like, you might be listening to this and say, gosh, I spent 60 grand on marketing all in last year or something like that. And I would just like, are you growing? Generally speaking, if a company is growing 20, 30, 40%, this is kind of the sales and marketing budget that they could expect.
Yep. And a company like this is probably still benefiting from a pretty good referral base of work at this size. When you start to scale outside of 3 million, you would decide to go for like 5, you'd have to spend a lot more on marketing probably if you're going to outpace your referral business and try and just buy the leads. I could see this being 6 or 7% lead spend. So that's why smart growth matters too. You don't want to outgrow maybe you would do that, but maybe you're just going to lose profit dollars. You're going to do a lot more work and make a lot less money. So stair-stepping it helps. The sales base and commission, I kind of reverse. I've already built a model. So I kind of came back in and I I said, this is probably what the sales expense would be. So I added this here, but basically between 6 and 7% is generally what your sales base and commission should be, what they earn on the revenue. All of these numbers are on the revenue, not the margin, by the way. It's a little easier way to see it and more commonly talked about that way. Sales leadership and coaching. This would be assuming you have 2 sales reps that are full-time and about $1,000 a month you're billing to them to support, coach, develop, make sure they're running effectively. And this compensation might go to the owner, or you might pay a coach to support them. But that's a reasonable amount for somebody that is needing support. If you have a very autonomous, they do everything really well, they sell $2 million and need zero help, you probably don't need to burden this kind of dollars here or in their compensation. You can help them make more money. But generally, I think it's healthy that $1,000 a month for 2 salespeople is what I'm putting here. Sales vehicles are roughly $7,000 per year for insurance and vehicle lease or something like that. I burden that in here. Phones, and then some incentives. So you do some parties, do some events with the salespeople. So this is the budget, high level. Comes out at 13.69. So you're spending $465,000 on sales and marketing in total. So this would be all the budgets. You might add more lines for your own company, but you want to have all the sales and marketing clear. Well, this 465 on this 1.428 in margin is 32.59. That's what the cost of margin is. Okay. So this is a budget. You could look at what your cost of margin has been. That's something you can look at your financials of a previous couple of years and understand what you've invested there. Maybe some years you were 40% cost on margin. Maybe you were actually like 15% because you were very lean. You didn't grow and things like that. But this is the starting point. And this would be assuming you have 2 sales reps making somewhere around $100,000, right? And which is a decent wage nationally for most people. I would say $150,000 of earnings is probably that, with inflation and everything going on, with cost of groceries, is a stable single income for somebody who's trying to provide for their household. A dual income home, 90 to 100 grand is pretty great for most people. So you can definitely get a lot of recruits and good talent for that price range. That's what I'm building here. You can find people that are maybe lower skilled, came from nonprofits, and they make 80 or 90,000, and they're super happy. But over the next 3 years, they're not going to be happy with that, right? So this is kind of modeling a steady compensation, and we'll get into how we got there with how you get to that number. But I kind of start with the model, and then I move backwards, and then I put these plugs in here. You're going to build it kind of off of 6%, and then you're going to figure out who gets what based on their skill and their goals. But this 6 or 7% is kind of what the constant is. So you could plug this a little differently how you want. So in this model, 32.5 is the budget. Well, I'm probably going to go to the salespeople at 32%. If this is my business plan, and I'm going to model that is their target. And we'll get into how that looks. But 32% for all sales and marketing, I bring that number down to each representative of salespeople in my company. So I'm just going to show you over here. Hopefully this is making sense. I'll take a pause. Haakon, is there any questions or clarity you want to make? Because you talk to a lot of people and you answer a lot of questions on this. Is there anything you want me to go clear with on this?
Yeah, I think I want to call out the symbiotic relationship here, and hopefully people are picking up on this, between the sales, the marketing, and the overall P&L. So I think sometimes people can oversimplify, and they just set up a comp structure like 10% of gross, and that's like really easy for them. It's really easy for their salesperson to think about. It just doesn't take into it doesn't consider the P&L all that much. And then I think in turn, like the marketing in a painting company, the marketing and sales work directly, right? We're a leads based, appointment based service business. So you really have to look at those things, together and in tandem. And so I think that would be, just from a principle standpoint, the compensation for sales people has to be holistically looked at and kind of fit into a broader ecosystem. And I think that's what we've learned over time and how you continue to grow in sustainable ways.
Mm-hmm. Well said. Yep. Don't forget your P&L. And I think your point about it's easier just to pick. There's a lot in sales compensation that people choose the easy path. The easy path is the one where you lose points on your profit. And I would just tell you the easy path usually doesn't give you a highly optimized profit producing machine. The clear path of business plan and proper planning and trending every month gives you a better path to sustainable, guaranteed profit at the end of a year, more likely than it would just kind of throwing some things out there. But I would say a lot of business owners, especially if you're just a single owner, it's just you, and you're doing better than you ever have done, you're willing to kind of just throw some money out at some people because you're doing less of the work. And I get that. I do. I absolutely do get that. But it isn't a sustainable asset at that point where people are held accountable to the real costs and you are making as much profit as you can in the business. And it's a great asset that produces a decent profit return. That is good stewardship. And that's more our culture. We want to be good stewards of the things that we are working in. So, can I continue, Haakon? Are you okay with that?
Yeah, good. Keep going.
Great. So I'm making an assumption that 2 salespeople, full-time salespeople, each of them are going to sell about 1.8. And you could definitely say 2.5, which would mean you have 2 people and then you hire somebody sometime mid-year to come in, and each person would have to sell around 1.4, or you could hire 3 and each person has to sell 1.2. The cost structure would be a little different. You might have one person that makes 100, one person that's making maybe 70, and the other person's making 40, right? You'd have to organize this budget of 208 based on what their goals are and when they come into the company. That can work. But I want to make it simple and just say there's 2 people, each are going to sell about 1.8. So that could be an owner that's got a bunch of accounts and takes on some marketing bids, and then one other salesperson that is doing full-time residential bids or commercial bids, things like that. Don't get too bogged down in thinking about that. It's 2 people. Then you can break down the overhead by 2 people now. So here's your total overhead, right? So you have your overhead in marketing, which is general marketing and marketing management. That is 40 grand. And then sales, leadership, vehicles, phone, and incentives is 42 grand. So 82 grand across the company. You need to burden that into the reps' plans. So each rep needs to be able to carry about 41,200 in their overhead. So the way we're getting to a sales compensation, we'll still stay on this model here. The sales rep is going to bring in 1.8, right? So 1.8 right here. So this, we're going to get to the model of how we get to comp, but it's very similar to a P&L in its look and feel. And we treat our salespeople like business owners that are running their own business, and they have a smaller version of a P&L that rolls up to our master plan. That's how we do it, right? So at 3.4, they have to produce 1.7, right? So 1.8 sold, 1.7 produced. If that makes sense to you in terms of how we're getting to the macro numbers, you have 2 people doing this. There you go. Then you could split this margin in half, and that's about what each person's bringing in margin. Then you burden the $41,000 into their compensation, and then they make you split this lead expense in half just to make easy math. That's how much lead expense they're carrying, and then you get to the comp. If they cost more in marketing and somebody else costs less, one person's going to make less compensation because their expenses are higher than the other sales rep that did really good and maximized their marketing spend to get a lot more sales. They're going to make more money. And we'll get into that in a minute. But I just want to simplify to say all you're doing is taking the P&L here and you're bringing it down to each rep level and if it should all roll up to your master plan, right? So they're that tied to each other. They have to align and they have to make sense in the global picture of your budget to how you compensate each salesperson. Make sense?
Yeah. And I think somewhat of a silly example, but just this idea of burdening these costs and not forgetting them. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like think of like sundries on a job, right? You could have the same job, 2 jobs. One of them has similar labor, similar material, but maybe one crew is just kind of haphazard and they spill a lot, or they're just going through, like if you don't apply those sundries, appropriately to those jobs, you're not gonna have a clear picture. And I think, what are the kind of soft leadership and things, make sure that the plan is accounting for that.
That's right. All right, I'm going to shift over to how this looks for a sales rep as they're building their compensation. But this is the underpinning as a business owner of how you start to plan what is your budget. So we would come into planning on hiring salespeople, and we'd say, well, I have a budget of $208,000 for base and commission. I have $175,000 for buying the leads to get to $3.6 million in sales, right? Make sense? All right, so we'll come into the sales compensation plan now. Most salespeople are not looking at your P&L. They're not in your business budget. That's for the business owner or for partners. That's at that level. Maybe the integrator of a company, a general manager, these higher level leadership roles are going to be in the P&L. Your salespeople are not. They might know some things about the general high level goals, but they don't understand all the cost components. But each salesperson is getting their own version of a P&L like this, right? So this is the template that breaks everything down for us and how we think about it. You could do this in any spreadsheet. You can do it in any form you would like, but you have this total sales target, production target at the top. All of these blue highlight boxes mean this is where we're going to put some inputs. So remember, our business was 32.5. That's what we planned it at. So I'm going to the sales reps with 32% cost on margin, because I want to have a little coverage on my business plan. Okay. I'm making an assumption that these are reps that maybe I had the year before, and they carried over maybe $100,000 of work that they sold Q4, towards the end of the year, and they brought that into the year. So this might be 50,000, it might be 0, it might be 100, but many of our reps sell exteriors in that Q4 timeframe, and then it snows in a seasonal business, and so it carries over. Some of you are going to have 0 carryover, and that's a factor. You just need to know what it is. It could be 0, but if it's $100,000, that's already sold work coming into the next year for somebody. Then I have a sales plan of 1.8. So you remember that 3.6, 2 salespeople, that's where we wanted to get to. So I want to have those 2 goals. It's never quite as linear as that. What I'm doing from an advanced perspective is I have 10 salespeople now, and I'll have probably 13 to 14 next year. And I'm putting a 17 some $1 million plan over all those people. Some people are selling 1.5. Some people are selling 2 million. Some people are selling 1.8. Depends on their previous history or what I think is realistic if it's a new sales rep. And I'm just building a plan that has coverage on my total production plan, right? So I'm doing it simply here with just a couple people, which is nice. If you have 2 salespeople, 3 salespeople, it's an easier process than when you have 14. I will say that. But it's the same concept, right? So here's my cost on margin. Then I have the carryover, sales plan, and then I'm assuming 90% of their sales gets produced, right? So you're getting to 1.72 in production as their budget. Again, this is somebody that's doing this maybe in December, getting ready for a January launch, or it's something you're doing with somebody in January as you hire them and getting their compensation planned before you award them kind of the base salary and the plan, and they start with your company. That's the stage that we're doing this. So this is not real yet. It could be based on real metrics from somebody who worked with you in the past of what's realistic, or you start with realistic expectations from day one for a new recruit of what you think they could do. But you change this number. So you could say it's 1.5. You could say it's 85%. You can change all these things, and it'll change what you can pay this person. But you always have to look at how this relates and bottoms up to your business plan. Do you have enough coverage to your overall business plan? If somebody comes in and says, I don't think I can sell 1.8, I want to sell 1.5, that probably means the owner has to sell more, or your other sales rep has to sell more, or you need to go higher, right? And that could change the game a little bit on how you build your business plan. So keep that in mind. 42% is the business target. So that's where you'd want each of your salespeople to be motivated. You might have a salesperson that does 44% margins and one that does 41, and that gets you there too in the macro of everything. But let's just keep it simple. So that would be $722,000 in margin. So 32% of this margin is $231,000. Okay. So 231 times 2 is what? 262, right? 462. You can see the total sales and marketing budget right now is 465. So that is really close. And you might have some little moves and things you make and what the budget is between both reps. But you want to make sure that total budget of each of your sales reps bubbles up and maybe even covers a little bit more of what your actual costs are to make sure that you have enough coverage. So if they bring in this margin at 32%, that is the budget that they can have for all the sales and marketing. So this would be, the margin is like the revenue into the plan. First, the margin is what's most important. And then there's the 231. Well, that really is the dollars that come into the salesperson's plan. And that $231,000 in this model is their money. But you have to figure out how much costs have to come out of that, right? So the costs down below are projected as such. So you have your lead expense. So you have to figure out, what is my marketing cost to get my work? What is my overhead expense? These are important buckets to understand how much of this 231 do I get as a salesperson. So the marketing costs here, so you look at $87,000 is what it's projected. This would be $7,000 average job size, 45% success ratio, kind of an average success ratio. They're generating 50 bids themselves. So the business has to go buy 520 bids for them throughout the year, right? At $168 a bid, that'd be about 87. So 87,000 times 2 is 174. If you come back to our business plan, that's not a bad target. We have 175,000 in lead expense we're planning. But I will just in this moment say, if this person does 50% SR, it would only cost 78. And you probably are going to get more revenue. If they did 520 bids that you went and bought, they would sell you more revenue than 1.8. If that makes sense. Or you only buy them 464, so you spend less marketing dollars to get to your basic first plan. That's just something to think about. The skill matters there. And in most cases, if you're scaling and wanting to grow, if you can buy the bids and it's reasonable to hit your budget for those bids, you want to have somebody close them at 50 to 55%, not 45, because you're going to get more revenue from that spend, more ROI from that spend, right? And for somebody like this salesperson, if they did that, they're going to start beating the budget, right? So it's going to cost less lead expense. So there's more of this $231,000 that they can have for themselves. And if they do more than $722,000 in margin because they oversold, that's more money for them as well. So that's where it starts to create some really exciting path for a salesperson to see, oh, if I increase my skill, I can really make this thing go, right? So this is the budget you're signing up with them for. They might do this though too. They might do 40, and then let's say they do $58,000 average job size. It might cost $120,000. That would be a big bummer, because now you are like, I'm not spending that much. So either they have to go find all those bids themselves. They'd have to go get 200 bids themselves to get back down to even 250 bids to get back down to, you were going to promise them 520 bids. So they have to get 250 bids themselves in order to make this comp plan work. Well, that'd be awesome if they did that, but that's a hard thing to do, I would say, generally. So that could be somebody that you are exiting and the owner takes on more sales, or you hire somebody else to come in and pick up the plan and you have to let somebody go. So that's how you're going to manage this plan as you go throughout the months. So these are the kind of the general expectations that you're setting for your salesperson skill, but it's also the sales coach's responsibility to make sure people are hitting $7,000 average shop size and 45+% SR. That is the skill development to help them achieve that. It's also culture management, making sure people feel motivated, making sure people see the vision. That's a support success ratio as well. If you feel like a winner and you feel like equipped, you sell better in the market for sure. That's also how you build the brand.
I want to add here, all of this is total transparency. So this is not like these KPIs that you're, messing with here to kind of get to a plan. That's not something that like you're cooking in your office and then you're kind of just delivering it to your salesperson. Like they need to,
right.
They need to be clear on these. They need to be able to see what these are. And again, to reiterate, if any of these, what is your average job size? What is your rep by rep success rate? How many bids were self-generated by the sales team versus bought by the marketing team? If you don't know those things, take this as an encouragement. You got to get clear on those things. And because your sales people need to be clear on those things, because understanding those, seeing those, and then building skill in each of these is how they can really be motivated and everybody's can be aligned.
This is a good time to say that estimates bought, this is not appointments put on calendars. This is estimates completed. So this is a great list of metrics that you have to be 100% clear on and tracking. And you could say, well, we generated 600 bids. Well, was it a bid or was it just, did it hit a calendar? Did it ever turn into an estimate you delivered? This is estimates delivered to customers. So I want to make sure that's clear because you have to do that in order to understand what your average job size is. You have to have your actual jobs, all of that. All of this data has to be known, but I want to make sure that's clear. The other thing is, what have you spent on marketing through every month? Do that calculation and just divide that over the estimates delivered up to that same time frame, and that'll give you a pretty good idea of what your cost per bid is. This cost of marketing bid, I always want to make sure I'm taking out the self-generated estimates to get to that number. So when you look at the business's global, marketing spend on bids, if you're not taking the sales rep generated ones out, you're going to have too low of a cost per bid. So you want to be able to pull out the 100 or so estimates that your sales team is generating. So in this model, you would have what is that? You'd have around 1,142 estimates. If you took your 175 in marketing spend over your 1,142, $153 per bid is what that would be. Well, if you did 153 and kind of screwed this up, it would show less marketing spend than it actually is, right? You want to make sure you understand what is it to go buy the bids? What is the cost per bid to go buy them, not sales rep generated? So this is saying $175,000. You're going to go buy 1,042 bids. So it's 168, which is what the number is there, right? So that's the planning that comes from the budget. So, yeah. So any other thoughts on how to get to your marketing expense?
That's great. Just keep moving.
So then here's that 41.2 number that we talked about. So if you go back to the business plan, 41.2 is the overhead per rep that you want to burden. You don't want to pay your reps the dollars. Like there's $128,000, $129,000 of real expense to the business owner. You don't want to overpay your sales reps and not have them accountable to those costs. So that's why we build this in here, right? They get paid after these costs are trended, not before. So if you have accurate cost for leads and accurate overhead is a plug. You are usually going to plug that, pay that, but it always needs to be trued up to what your real overhead is. If you make overhead adjustments throughout the year, you have to adjust them here as well. Otherwise, you're going to not have enough coverage on your overhead. I generally like, if my overhead truly does cost $82,000, $83,000, I like to be able to burden enough in sales plans to have maybe $100,000 covered, right? So then I have a little room to make a little extra profit and some room for screw ups because sometimes that happens, right? So you can also build a contingency budget in your P&L, and that could cover some of the oopsies, right? But generally, you want your overhead to be real to each rep, and your lead expense to be real for what's fair. And there's definitely a point at which you look at your lead expense and overhead, and you're like, man, is a sales rep going to make enough money here, right? You might make some concessions in your business plan to make sure you get quality salespeople. So if you were projecting, I can only pay salespeople $50,000. Well, that's kind of unrealistic. You probably have to have a higher cost on margin, right, to be able to scale and grow into a plan. But it should make sense eventually to a good net profit. So they all go together usually in what we're doing here. So these two buckets are critical to trend out. This one is usually less of an issue. It's really the lead expense. What is your real cost of a marketing bid? That's the one you want to look at every month. So if Susie salesperson here, if we have a real soft market and it costs us $205 per bid, it's $106,000. It's a very different cost, right? So that cost was now almost $150,000. So 150 minus 231, that's now what I can make as a salesperson. And that means I should sell a higher success ratio, or I should go drive some more bid activity for myself to be able to make more of that money, which is these are real scenarios. Oops, it cost me this much in the past. It cost me more this year, or a softer market. Well, this changes sales behavior to now I need to go sell with better skill, and I need to go grab more of my own estimates to be able to make more money because my marketing costs more. The business owner feels that, and the salesperson should feel that. It should drive the right incentivizing conversations with your salespeople of where to focus their time and energy for their own compensation and the business's profit. Does that make sense?
It's great.
Okay. So then we come down below. We just did all that, and we haven't even got to what is their base and commission, huh? Which is the question most people are asking. I just did a bunch of things that had nothing to do with base and commission, right? All of the stuff I just did is where you need to start as a business owner in how you're planning this. You start here, figure out what it's going to look like. Then you go here and you start to model some things out to see what you can pay people. Down below, now we're getting to base and comp. So right now, at $35,000 and 8% commission, this person would make $97,000. And I would just say they're going to generate 50 self-gen bids. I typically incentivize our salespeople. I pay them $100 per estimate. If you are $80 per estimate, I would not pay them $100 per estimate. And I would pay them like $30 per estimate, right? Or $40 per estimate. Just as some cash while they go, right? But at $168, $100 to the salesperson is a pretty good deal for those bids, and that money goes right to them. But I do calculate that in the cost of their comp. So if their sales results don't warrant, if they generated all these bids but didn't get the sales results from them, they'd be upside down on their plan, and I would have to adjust their commissions or their base wage downward, right? So, but I do like paying them to go hunt for their own self-gen bids. Every month I usually pay them commissions, and I pay them for their self-generated bids. So this is assuming $5,000 in the year for generating their own bids, $57,000 for the commissions from the margin that gets produced, and then a $35K base. Not a big base, but you typically have them start picking up their commissions in that May, June, July, and they are usually fine. And it creates a lot of fight for them to go make sure they're getting commissions. And it's a lower guarantee, so you have a little less risk in the business of guaranteed payout to your people until you know that they can perform. So there's better ways to protect, the P&L and not overpay people. $50,000 to $7,000, a lot of commissions you can hold back if you needed to, if they weren't performing. So lower base, higher commission. They're still getting a great wage, right? But it's very different if you go like $60,000 base, and then you're guaranteeing that you're running that basically every. Yeah, here's another perspective. Now you're making 60 base and 36 on commissions. You're running this every month in maybe slower season when their sales aren't getting produced yet, And if they don't work out, you've way overpaid. So you really want that to be as low as you can get it and incentivize them more on commission instead, right? And you can, with the way I do this, I usually, you can build it right to the cost of margin percent. So 8.5, let's say. So it's showing basically 31.9 on a goal of being 32. And they would make 101. You are going to adjust this each month. Typically I build this and I roll January, February. I start to see, are they on track to their goals for those 2 months? But it's hard to get a trend, especially in a seasonal business. But by May, I have a pretty good idea if we're moving for a comp adjustment, and I'm either making a decision to exit a sales rep due to performance, or I'm making a decision to adjust a sales rep's comp based on the reality of where they're at and working with them deeply to come back and achieve the original comp that they wanted. I love it when a sales rep never puts me in a conversation where I'm talking about an adjustment to their plan. I'm just calculating their bonus every single month. I have a rep that's like that. And it's just, I mean, I think it's up to like $45,000 in a bonus because they're crushing it, right? So it's just, look at how big your bonus is getting by the end of the year, right? And I actually paid a big chunk of that bonus early just so they felt some of the reward early, right? Which was fun. So that is, that's how I get to my base and commission. I am always recruiting and convincing people to come in with this lower number, and then I will show them kind of when they will start making the income, and I'll work with them on how that's going to work with their cash flow plan for their own individual home. It makes sense to me. I get it. If you are like, my needs are 50 grand a year, I have to at least get that in a monthly compensation. You can either do a commission advance and then true it up, or you can just increase the base and lower the commission a little bit. Everyone has a little bit different scenario, but a lot of my reps are between 26,000 and 45,000. I have 0 that are more than that right now. So, and part of that is most of my sales reps have trust that, oh yeah, I'm going to sell. This company can generate some bids. I know I'm going to get out and make it happen. If somebody's a little bit more concerned, you might have to start with a little higher base and lower commission. Or you find people that are willing to take this, that their life works, they have maybe a second income, and they're willing to just go after this. That's also a great way to recruit too. I'll stop there. Questions on any of that?
No, it's great. I think it calls out here for some folks. I think there's some out there that like they just go the commission only route a little bit, and they're kind of like, hey, I'm going to hedge my the P&L on the salesperson. I just want to, they kind of push that, and, that's going to draw a certain type of salesperson. It kind of narrows the stage of life and things like that. That level of base can feel like, oh, that's not very much. But I think that just puts the onus on, like, yeah, it can feel like not that much if the salesperson doesn't see clearly how they can make great money and actually how that can be to their benefit.
That's exactly right.
If they're confident in the skill. And again, just kind of goes back to like, you have to be able, the business has to have clarity on these numbers and KPIs so that salespeople can have clarity on those numbers and KPIs so that they can have the confidence of how they can go make money, and maybe just speak to, because I know this dynamic, there's different people on the sales team making money in different ways. Do you want to speak to that? Like some reps get there this way, some reps get there that way. Speak to that dynamic a little bit on your team.
Yeah. So I have a rep that generates most of their estimates through self-gen account that they've built. So they have a book of business they work with. Every year they provide business with them. He keeps the relationship alive with them. So that person can sell $1 million and make $120,000 because their marketing expense is like $15,000 to $20,000, right? They're taking only a couple marketing bids. So you can get to an over $100,000 comp, but it took them 3 years to build those accounts and continue to stabilize that. Then I have a rep that's going to sell over 2.2 million, and they did it through confident selling, higher, like $8,000, $7,000 to $8,000 average shop size at 55% success ratio. That person just wants all the marketing bids they can get, and they close them, and the ROI is great, and the compensation comes that way, right? Because he has fixed overhead, but he's just ramping the margin he can produce way over where he should, and he'll be the highest paid painting person. But it's a lot of work, right? That's 600 bids, something like that. But he closes a lot and has a lot of energy and makes a lot of money doing it that way. So there's different ways that you can get there, but it's still the same model of what the cost on margin target is. It's just how they come at it can be a little different.
Yeah, I think that's great because you can appeal to different people. This is a model that I think we see that sometimes. This would maybe be a little bit of my critique of like the one call close model. There's still a bit of that. I just think that there's the type of salesperson that can thrive in that model. It's just a very like single track type of person.
Right.
Whereas I think this model can fit a lot of different types of people with different strengths.
Yep. And I think the last thing I'd mention is the fun part for me is the profit share bonus dashboard. Again, you had mentioned this earlier. We're kind of showing the whole thing. Like this is our P&L, right? There's no like cost of living raise or whatever. This is everything. And you can make as much as you want or as little as you want based on your skill, based on like you have a minimum you have to hit, right? Because I have a plan to hit, but there's kind of unlimited potential here. There's no cap, right? I mean, I'm trending bonuses and I'm like, man, I'm giving that person a ton of money, but they earned it, right? They had to do a lot of work to get that. No cap, get after it. But you can see there's a little calculation here of, okay, the total cost projection is 230 and the total marketing budget is 231. So there's a bonus here, not much, but let's just say they came in and did 40, they crushed these jobs and put a ton of extra dollars in. Now the budget's 247 and they have got a little profit pool of 13,000. Now I like to have the profit pool be shared between the owner or the manager and the rep. So you can do 50-50, you could do 80-20, but this is basically 80% of it goes to the sales rep, or you could say 33% goes to the sales rep. You could say 50-50 goes to the sales rep. There's different ways to do it, but generally I land at 2/3 to the sales rep, 1/3 to the management team. And there's a lot of work that goes into a sales rep and supporting them. I want them to share in their success, just like I want the rep to get most of it. And so if the bonus on the budget there is 13,000, that rep would get 8,600. Now they're making 115,000, right? The other thing I would mention is there's a net margin, which is all of the costs minus the margin you brought in and produced. That would be net margin. So this person would bring in 540,000 in net margin, just margin into the business. That's pretty good. In our company of Paris Painting, we have a president's club where if you achieve $450,000 in net margin, you're going to Mexico with us the next, January or February. So there's a little president's club there. If you're a first year person, I usually have it at 375 because it's harder to get as critical momentum as a second year person. But this is a nice target. And you could have it higher or lower, whatever you want. But it's nice to have kind of the profit share and the president's club for salespeople to see how that bonus can accrue and are they on track to a bigger incentive like a trip or something like that with the team. So these pieces right here are kind of the unique. Most companies don't show them a path to something like this, or it's somewhat obscured. This is actually very clear from the beginning, and then you trend towards this plan. Are we on track or off track every single month? You kind of look at what is real and trend. How's our bonus looking? Are you on track to the President's Club? So those are two inspirational things that I think really buy our salespeople into the program, because they see, hey, the owner's giving away a lot here. It's not just commission and base, right? So maybe somewhere else you might make 105, and then the owner gets to have the nice split, right? Versus we're showing you how you're incentivized to drive that. You want that to be not a zero. You want that to be more. Well, the owner can win and the salesperson can win in that environment. So it's probably the last thing I would share on the general plan with the time that we have.
That's great, man. I think that's a good place for us to pull up. Hopefully that gave folks a lot to chew on. And yeah, again, this has been an iterative process, and I think we've just come to the conviction of it takes this level of detail. It takes this level of intentionality and optionality across the plan to, what we're interested in is building assets, predictable profits, year after year at scale. And it really takes this level of and I would say this gets easier. I think this gets internalized, and it gets pretty fun whenever reps internalize this, sales managers internalize this. So it's not crazy. It's just, I think it's just a way deeper level of detail than most companies do, primarily because they're just not as clear on their data.
Yep. And probably the last note I would leave, just to free people up in their business planning. We have companies across the nation that have a plan that looks kind of like this. It's not that far off of what their cost of margin is. They've got good bid volume coming in. They've got a good brand, and they have really motivated, skilled salespeople. Paris Painting has been at 33% in years, and then we've had years where we've been at 35 to 40% cost on margin, and those pieces are always managed and worked on. But it is as you scale and push into the market, and depending on how skilled your production managers are to deliver the margin, how much cost you invested in, what it cost in the marketing, all of those pieces, it's about the plan into what is real. But I would say for us, we're going to try and do a plan at 17 million next year. We'd be looking at holding around a 35% margin and really managing to that point with all the lessons learned. And those all come from the business planning of what we learned and know. But you don't want to go give 35% margin to salespeople because Paris Painting is, right? You want to go look at your business plan and see what you can do with what your data and facts are. And so just keep that in mind.
It's great, man. Feel free to reach out to myself, to Micah. Happy to jam with you if, applying this to your business or diving a little bit deeper on this business. We're always open to help. Micah, thank you, brother. This is a lot of value. So thank you for coming on again and taking the time to run through it.
Absolutely. I hope people enjoy it.
All right, guys. We'll see you next time.